and welcome to Parkside Online. We hope that our conversation about going back helps you experience Jesus.
Definitely. And we're going to open tonight by going back. When I was a kid, I lived on the top of this big hill, and sometimes in the summer, we would watch the lightning storms roll in, and I would climb this tree, which was madness. Kiddies, if you're watching this at home, don't climb the tree during the lightning storm, not a good option. And I would just feel the wind roar up the hill and shake the tree, and the crackle of the lightning and the crash of the thunder. And I felt very much alive.
Yeah.
It was good. And now that I'm no longer that little kid and no longer living in the same place, we're starting to experience similar storms. We've had a couple of thunderstorms where we live, a couple of lightning storms. And I remember a time when I went back and I went home just to see how it was. We'd all left the family home years ago. And when I got back, I drove to the corner, because we used to live on this street corner, and I looked down the hill that I remember being this massive hill, and it was probably, I don't know, 30 meters tall. Like it would just look like this gentle rise. And then I looked down the other way to make sure that I wasn't being mistaken. And what I remember as a kid being a long hill up to our house was really only about 150 meters. And so I arrived in the location, but it definitely did not have the same feeling as it had once before. And tonight we want to explore what it means to go back. Have you ever had a moment in your life where you've wanted to go back home or go back to a place?
Yeah, when I've travelled, I've travelled around Australia and around the world a little bit, and so there are places where I've just felt like I could live here, so I would like to go back. And so Tassie's one of those places, and there's a few parts of that part of Australia that I really love and that feel like I could go back and keep going back.
Have you been back?
I have, and many times.
Yes, and so did it still have that original magic?
Some of the places, yes. Others, I was like, well, now I've come back, I probably don't need to go back again. So I could go back to Tassie again, but there are some places that I go, okay, it's not quite the same.
Yeah. That's true. And as you're watching this, perhaps you've had an experience of going back, and it may be something simple as returning home. Perhaps you're someone who returns to reunions, school reunions, work reunions, and you may see similar faces, but perhaps different personalities.
Yeah.
And of course, at this time of year, going back for many of us is actually going home, maybe not to the place where we grew up, but to the people that we often grew up with. And I recognise that not everyone sees Christmas as a time to go home to family, but for a lot of us it does. What we want to do is draw some inspiration tonight from a passage of scripture, and this is written in Matthew, and I'm reading from Matthew chapter 2, and it says this: when Herod died. Now, just to fill in the blank here, what do we know about Herod at this point?
He was the ruler of the time and oppressing the people who belonged in the place that he was living.
And when we chatted this morning, that oppression took a particular form just before this. You want to tell us what that was?
Just before this, where he wanted to kill a lot of kids who were under 2 because he'd heard about a new king being born and he was threatened.
And that desire to kill was actually expressed.
Yes.
Thousands were slain. And so just before this, he talks about weeping heard across the towns as this horrendous act was committed. And so when this pretty oppressive king died, this is it. An angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joesph in Egypt. And so what's happened is that God's warned Joesph, take your family, get out of here. Someone's trying to kill you. And it says this: get up, the angel said, take the child and his mother back to the land of Israel, because those who are trying to kill the child are dead. So Joseph got up and returned to the land of Israel with Jesus and his mother. But when he learned that the new ruler of Judea was Herod's son Archelaus, he was afraid to go. Then, after being warned in a dream, he left for a different region, the region of Galilee. So the family went and lived in a town called Nazareth. And this fulfilled what the prophets had said, he will be called a Nazarene. Now, and so here we have Joesph going back. This is our story, right? And there's a couple of things that stand out to me here, is that as we read this, there's a particular phrase here where it says, go back because those who wanted to kill you are dead. Now you're nodding wisely there.
Yes.
What's prompting that wise nodding?
Oh, well, I just know where I have read that before.
Where?
And so in a book in the Old Testament, in Exodus, I think, the same kind of phrase was spoken to a guy named Moses.
Okay.
Yeah. So he had fled Egypt.
Yep.
Because actually he was the one who committed a crime.
Yeah.
And so he ran away and people wanted him dead. But then there was a time when the same message came to him saying those who wanted you dead are gone. So you need to go back.
Go back. Yes. And so if you're listening to this or reading this as an early audience, someone who knows both of these stories or who knows the old story of Moses, you read this, there is a parallel that goes off, that may have gone off and said, well, this guy here is trying to make a connection between this baby and Moses. Now, you may know, but for those who don't, what did Moses actually ultimately rise up and do?
He ended up leading God's people, the Israelites, out of Egypt from slavery into freedom.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, we're going to just jump around a bit, so just bear with me here. But as we see here, this story may be drawing a connection. There is a connection there between someone who led a group of people from slavery and oppression into freedom. Right? And this story is trying to build a connection. Now, I want to just jump to the end for a moment. This is a bit weird, right? Because the last line that we read is this. So the family went and lived in a town called Nazareth, and this fulfilled what the prophets had said. He will be called a Nazarene. Now, when we talk about fulfilled, what do we usually talk about?
Either completed, like if someone fulfilled an order at Christmas time, we're all thinking about
that. We put in your order for your
order
presents.
to be fulfilled, so it's completed and I'm going to get it. So it has come to be. It's arrived on my doorstep, or it is... I have received something that was promised.
For sure. Now, there are also another way of understanding fulfilled, which says, this was told before it happened and now it has happened, so that's been fulfilled. But the difficulty that we find here, as the prophets had said, if you flick back into the Jewish scriptures, the law, the writing, and the prophets, right, there's actually nothing that talks about the Messiah coming from Nazareth. And so we're left with a problem. What does he mean then when he says, as the prophet said, has been fulfilled? And so we are left with a couple of options. Number one, that a Nazarene just means it wasn't a popular town, and it may mean that this kid is going to grow up to be worthless and undervalued.
And so there are parts of the Old Testament that talk about the coming one being that. So,
and actually, when this baby grows up, one of his followers talks about, is this someone that I can follow because nothing good comes out of this town called Nazareth? But another way I think to see it is that when Jesus is described here as the fulfillment, it's not necessarily talking about something that, in this case, was told before and then happened now. But just like Moses was someone who, in his humanity, led a group of people from slavery and oppression into freedom, that was actually a signpost saying, this is what a leader can look like. But then Jesus appears and says, I am the one. I am the one who not only will lead you out of physical slavery into a new geographic land, but I will lead you out of every kind of slavery and addiction, every kind of destructive habit that rules your life. And Matthew is setting us up here to say, this is the one. This is one. If you are seeking freedom, that this is the one that you will find fulfillment in. Your hopes for freedom will be fulfilled in this one here. And so as we look at this, we go, well, how does this happen? And something stands out to me here is that it's pretty miraculous. In your life, I wonder, have you ever experienced an angel appearing to you in a dream? I've had some wild dreams. I used to dream that I was a part of the Fellowship in the Rings in J.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings saga. It was beautiful. There was colour everywhere, and I was just cruising along the back of the line. I thought it was great. Did it change my life? Certainly not. Did I make any decisions based on it? Certainly not. Have you ever had a dream that changed the direction of your life?
I don't know that I would call it a dream, but I have had like what is another term for a dream, like a vision, whereas where I felt that God had spoken to me. So it did change the direction of my life. Leaving one job and, living one way, moving into another way of living. So yeah. And I was.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
I was afraid. Well, I had a particular job, and I felt that God was saying, leave this job.
Yeah.
And I was afraid. And I remember him saying, do you trust me? And I said, no, but it's not how I wanted to live. I want to live trusting God. So I spent probably about 3 days just really praying and reading the Bible and just listening to God and going, I want you to help me trust you. And after those 3 days, then I did leave that job. But in the midst of that too, it was like God was saying to me, it's going to feel unsteady and unstable, like walking on water. It's not a hard surface. And he's like, so take one more look back at stability. The rest of your life is going to feel quite unstable. And so even though I was afraid, I still did it because I trust God. But it was a life-changing thing, and I need to go back to that all the time to go, no, but I do remember that God spoke to me and I trust him, because when life feels unstable, I want to reach for something sturdy.
Yeah, that's pretty natural. Yeah. And so when we're talking here about dreams, perhaps you can relate to another story, perhaps you can relate to mine. But I think that we have a God who expresses himself to us.
Yeah.
And sometimes that happens in a dream.
Yeah.
We may be half asleep and something appears to us, very much an external. There are also dreams, I think, that are a gift of God, where we find ourselves seeing something that no one else can see. We find ourselves seeing a future for a group of people, where we find ourselves seeing justice where there is currently injustice, where we find ourselves seeing hope where currently there is despair. And that doesn't feel externally. It actually feels like something that has welled up within you. And yet as we bring those to God, we can connect with God in both of those kinds of dreams. And both of those dreams have the power to change our lives as we bring them to God. And we see that the power of Joesph here is that he receives a dream and he acts on it. Like he moves forward. And this is not a guy with any fancy training. He's just a simple builder and says, all right, this is what I think God is saying to me. This is the direction I'm going to go. And like you, it's actually written here, he was afraid. Like, this is not someone sitting on top of a horse on a hill going, follow me, I know the way. But this is someone who says, I think I've heard something. I think this is the direction to go. I am not sure. There's uncertainty, there's anxiety. And I think that's a great check that when we have a dream that is given by God, and whether we feel that's external or something that's welled up within us, that we will naturally see the end of ourselves. We will naturally see the end of our resources. We will naturally see that this is something that is beyond us to fulfill.
And I think that's a cool thing to bring out. And the fact that Joesph was afraid, not that it's cool that he was afraid, but that he acknowledged it, and God still worked with that. And even for me, and for others of us. Because sometimes I think, and I've had conversations with people where we might think that if God's calling us to something, I won't feel afraid or anxious, and I'll just be all confident that yes, this is where I am to go. But sometimes that may be the case. But even what this story shows is that you can be willing to trust God, and even in your fear, move forward.
Yeah,
your fear doesn't have to paralyze you.
Yeah, and I think it's powerful. Like we see this example even in Jesus, is that the scriptures write about Jesus that he endured the cross for the joy set before him. So he saw something on the other side.
Yeah.
And yet the same scriptures tell us that that process, that the experience of getting to from what he saw to actually the reality of that was so anxiety inducing that he sweat drops of blood, that he actually cried out to God and said, God, I take this away.
Yeah, if there's any other way.
Yeah. And so this is not just an inspirational thing, but actually this is the way of Jesus. And when we find ourselves confronted with something that may be yet unseen to other people, when we find ourselves confronted with a challenge to action that induces anxiety, that we feel is beyond our resources, that actually this is the path forward that Jesus invites us to.
Yeah.
And we see here that as Joesph seeks to go home, he's given those words, go back, that he goes to a different place. Yeah. And actually, there are some people who I think use religion as a call to go back. Oh, life was better in certain number of years ago here. Life was simpler a certain number of years ago. And yet what we see here is that Joesph couldn't go back.
Yeah. Well, and when I had my thing where it was like, take a look because you're never going back.
Yep. And when we talk about dreams and seeing something unseen, sometimes the temptation can be to go back to maybe a dream that we felt we lost sight of. Maybe there's a sense of purpose that we felt we had at one time. I want to tell you right now that the way of Jesus is not to go back. That the way of Jesus is actually to move forward into that new vision, into that new reality. Because as we follow Jesus, when he endured that anguish, when he went through that hardship for the joy that was on the other side, there is a power that moved through Jesus, a spirit that moved through Jesus, that actually is what is moving through us. And when Jesus says, come follow me, he's saying there will be a challenge, that there is a process, but there is new life on the other side. And I don't say this lightly. It may feel like everything is gone. It may feel like life has ended. And that may be relationships, that may be occupationally, it may be, sadly, we still live in a world where for some, following Jesus actually does mean the end of their life. And yet Jesus says, but beyond that, there is a way forward. There is no going back. Follow me to the future. And what we see that here in the example of Joesph, that he moved forward into fear, and because he obeyed, God entered the world. Because he obeyed, God survived the attacks of an oppressive king. And because he obeyed, we can experience the nearness of Jesus this Christmas. So the invitation tonight is to follow Jesus into a new future. To have the faith to see what others might not see. To have the courage to trust even when we feel afraid. And to follow God to wherever that new destination is. And that, I think, is the invitation of Jesus. And if you're ready to make that choice now in your life, then we just invite you to pray a simple prayer that we pray so often, which is, Jesus, I give you my life in this moment. Jesus, I give you the old dreams. I give you my past experiences. Give me your life. Give me that new dream. Give me the way forward. And so just join us now in praying this simple prayer. Jesus, I give you my life. Give me your life. Jesus, I give you my life. Give me your life. If you pray that prayer tonight, we would love to help you take the next steps on your journey, wherever they may be, whatever direction that is. Please leave us a comment. Get in touch with us on our social channels. And thanks for tuning in. God bless you.